Hello, this is Patrice, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 14th issue of the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Times exclusive inside Israel's secret operation to cultivate Ahmadinejad. The years-long effort to groom the former Iranian president as an intelligence asset culminated in a dramatic effort to take him to a Mossad safe house in Iran in the early days of the war, but the plan fell apart. This article is by Mark Mazzetti, Julian E. Barnes, Farnaz Fasihi, and Ronan Bergman. In early 2024, the rector of a university in Budapest received a startling request from a top Hungarian government official. The official told the rector, Professor Gergely Dili, that Ludovica University of Public Service should hold a climate change conference and extend an invitation to an unlikely guest, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the widely reviled former president of Iran. Even more shocking was the reason. The official told Mr. Delhi that the conference was merely a front for Mr. Ahmadinejad to have a secret discussion in Budapest with intelligence operatives from Israel, Mr. Ahmadinejad's avowed enemy. Mr. Delhi knew that the invitation could tarnish both his own reputation and that of the university, but he said in an interview, he believed he might be playing a role in saving lives. You have two enemies, and if these enemies want to talk with each other, then it's best to do what you can to make them talk, he said. Mr. Ahmadinejad's 2024 visit to the university and a second one the following year were part of a years-long Israeli effort to groom him as an intelligence asset who, when the time came, could be installed as Iran's new leader, according to both American and Iranian officials familiar with the operation, who spoke on condition of anonymity to describe sensitive intelligence. Recruiting Mr. Ahmadinejad was of such a priority for Israel that the country's then spy chief, David Bernia, even traveled to the Hungarian capital in 2024 to meet with Mr. Ahmadinejad personally, according to former American officials. Soon afterward, they said Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence service, notified the CIA that it had been in contact with Mr. Ahmadinejad. Israel's decision to build a regime change plan around Mr. Ahmadinejad is an extraordinary twist in the saga of the country's relations with the former president, who was known for accelerating Iran's nuclear program, calling regularly for the destruction of Israel and denying the Holocaust. In recent years, according to American officials, Israel secretly paid money to Mr. Ahmadinejad for housing and travel, and Israeli operatives met him abroad on several occasions, including during his trips to Budapest. The efforts culminated in late February of this year during the first days of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran, with an audacious operation to relocate the former leader who had been living under strict surveillance in Tehran. The goal, to set in motion the plan to topple the current regime and install Mr. Ahmadinejad. The plan failed. On February 28th, an Israeli strike hit Mr. Ahmadinejad's compound, targeting the building of his bodyguards and his armored vehicle. After the strike, according to four senior Iranian officials, a black Peugeot car arrived, picked up Mr. Ahmadinejad, and whisked him away at high speed from the chaotic scene. American and Iranian officials with knowledge of the operation said the car had been driven by Mossad operatives who took Mr. Ahmadinejad to a secret safe house in Iran. But the former Iranian leader was upset about the frantic rescue operation, and he appeared to be disillusioned about the Israeli plan to return him to power, according to people with knowledge of what occurred. He eventually left the safe house under circumstances that are still unclear. Mr. Ahmadinejad was not seen in public again until last Monday, when he made a brief appearance at the funeral procession for the slain supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. His current status remains uncertain, but four senior Iranian officials said that Mr. Ahmadinejad was in the custody of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' intelligence wing, under house arrest now that Iran has learned about much of his interactions with Israel. Israel officials have not commented publicly about the plan to install Mr. Ahmadinejad as Iran's leader, which was part of a broader attempt to topple the government in Tehran. Another element involved arming and training Iranian Kurdish opposition forces based in northern Iraq to cross into Iran, hold the territory there, and eventually move toward the capital, Tehran, an effort that never manifested. The regime change plan involved a sequence of special operations, very, very unique, that was supposed to happen. Tamir Heyman, a former head of intelligence for the Israeli Defense Force, told the PBS talk show Firing Line in May, after the New York Times first revealed details of Mr. Ahmadinejad's role in the plan. And Ahmadinejad was part of that sequence. Mossad officials did not respond to requests for comments. Aki Abar Javanfakar, a spokesman for Mr. Ahmadinejad, declined to comment. As usual, this is an exceedingly long article, so I'll just read the concluding paragraphs. Until last week, Mr. Ahmadinejad had not been seen in public since late February, when he was whisked away from his Tehran home in the Black Peugeot. Last Monday, he made a brief surprise appearance as part of the Ayatollah Khomeini's funeral procession. Videos of the procession showed Mr. Ahmadinejad wearing a heavy jacket in the 90-degree heat with a surgical mask pulled down to his chin. Iran's two other living former presidents, Hassan Rouhani and Mohammad Khatami, were not invited and did not appear in any of the funeral ceremonies. Mr. Ahmadinejad stood with his head down, not speaking, flanked on all sides by what appeared to be security guards. Again, if you'd like to hear the article in total, the number to call 716-821-5555. Lindsey Graham's sister appointed to finish his Senate term. Governor Henry McAllister of South Carolina named Darlene Graham Nordone to replace Mr. Graham, who died on Sunday. This article is by Patricia Mazzei. Governor Henry McMaster of South Carolina said on Monday that he would appoint Senator Lindsey Graham's sister, Darlene Graham Nordone, to finish his Senate term after Mr. Graham's death on Saturday. Standing next to Ms. Nordone at a news conference, Mr. McMaster said it was his duty under the law to select someone to serve in the place of this irresistible man, this irreplaceable man, this extraordinary man, for the remainder of his term. Lindsey took care of his little sister in years long departed, Mr. McMaster said at the State House in Columbia, South Carolina. It's my honor to ask his little sister, Darlene Graham, to finish his work for him now, Mr. McMaster said at a news conference held in the State House in Columbia, South Carolina. Ms. Nordone accepted the appointment, saying it would be a privilege to get to finish some of her brother's work over the next several months. I think this is what Lindsey would have wanted, and I plan to honor him in this way, she said. She added she missed Mr. Graham more than I can even put into words. But I'm going to do this, she said. I got it. Mr. McMaster, a Republican, announced his pick hours after President Trump had written in social media posts that appointing Ms. Nordone would be a fabulous tribute to Lindsey, who loved her dearly. Mr. McMaster said that he has asked Ms. Nordone to fill the seat after they spoke in the wee hours of Sunday morning following Mr. Graham's death, and that she accepted through tears. I called the president afterwards, and he thought that was a great idea, Mr. McMaster said. Mr. Graham and Ms. Nordone shared a close bond. Both of their parents died in a 15-month stretch, leaving Mr. Graham at 22 to help care for his younger sister, who was then 13. She introduced him when he launched a long-shot Republican presidential bid in the 2016 election. Ms. Nordone, 62, is a mother of two who worked to help people with disabilities find jobs. She does not appear to have previous political experience other than supporting her brother. There is a long history in American politics of having the widowed wives of men who die in office finish out their terms. Mr. Graham, who never married, joked when he ran for president that if he won, maybe his sister would take on the duties of the First Lady. Senator Tim Scott, Republican of South Carolina, endorsed Ms. Nordone's appointment in a social media post after Mr. Trump's. After speaking with Darlene, there is no one better who understands Lindsey's love for family, our state, and our country, he wrote. He later appeared with Mr. McMaster and Ms. Nordone at the news conference. Mr. Graham, who was 71 and running for re-election when he died, was set to be on the ballot in November as a strong favorite to win a 5th Senate term. Now, a special Republican primary election will be held on August 11th. Candidates will be able to file to run between July 21st and July 28th. If no candidate wins a majority, a primary runoff will be held on August 25th. Ms. Nardone indicated she would serve out the remainder of Mr. Graham's term, but not that she would compete in the special Republican primary next month. The names of several Republican members of Congress from South Carolina have been raised as potential contenders to run in next month's primary. Mark Lynch, a businessman who finished second in this Republican Senate primary in June, has already said he intends to run. South Carolina leans heavily conservative, so the new Republican nominee would be strongly favored to win in November. The Democratic nominee is Dr. Annie Andrews, a pediatrician. Judge denounces Trump's IRS suit as improper exercise in self-dealing. The decision also recommended disciplinary action against the lawyers involved, including the acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. This is an article by Andrew Duran and Alan Feuer. A federal judge ruled on Monday that President Trump's lawsuit against the Internal Revenue Service was an improper exercise in self-dealing and barred him from claiming that the extraordinary tax protections he received were part of a legitimate settlement agreement. In the 56-page order, the judge, Kathleen M. Williams, also referred the lawyer who brought Mr. Trump's case against the IRS to the Florida bar for potential disciplinary proceedings. She added that she would forward her decision to the New York bar for its continuing investigation of the acting attorney, Todd Blanche, who faces a Senate confirmation hearing this week. The decision by Judge Williams, who sits in federal district court in Miami, did not explicitly kill the deal that Mr. Trump had worked out with his own government to receive what amounted to amnesty from IRS investigations. But the scathing ruling exposed the negotiations between Mr. Trump's personal lawyers and senior officials at the Justice Department for what she says they were backroom dealings that did not arise from a legitimate legal process. The nature of the suit itself and the conduct of the parties and counsel from its filing make plain that this was an attempt to use the court to provide some legitimacy to an agreement to confer immunity to people and entities affiliated with the president, the judge wrote. The ruling was the latest example of a federal judge calling out the Trump administration for twisting normal court procedures to the president's advantage. Mr. Trump has repeatedly used the criminal justice system to pursue and punish those he believes to be his enemies. But in this case, Judge Williams wrote, he sought to use the civil legal system to benefit himself, even though the law did not allow it. Whatever may be the party's wishes, inclinations, or the dictates of their passion, she wrote, they cannot alter the state of facts or evade the rule of law. In January, Mr. Trump sued the IRS, blaming it for the leak of his tax returns during his first term and demanding at least $10 billion in damages. But rather than taking the typical steps to defend the agency against Mr. Trump's claims, the Justice Department instead reached what it called a settlement agreement that included two remarkable provisions. The first created a $1.8 billion fund aimed at compensating allies of Mr. Trump who say they were victims of the so-called government weaponization. The prospect of Mr. Trump's administration making extensive payouts to people who stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021, immediately set off a political firestorm, and Mr. Blanche later said the Justice Department would not move forward with the fund. But Mr. Blanche, Mr. Trump's former personal lawyer, had also signed a separate order granting the president, his family, and their business-wide ranging and unprecedented immunity from tax inquiries. He directed the IRS to stop any ongoing audits of the Trumps and also told the agency to not conduct any new investigations of tax returns they had already filed. Again, due to the length of this article, I'll skip towards the end. In a statement, a representative of the Justice Department called Judge Williams partisan and said the government and Mr. Trump were in fact at odds with each other. There was a live dispute because the plaintiffs sought relief that the government had not provided, the spokesperson said. Beyond making referrals for Alejandro Brito, Mr. Trump's primary lawyer in the case, and Mr. Blanche, Judge Williams also said she would send her order to the District of Columbia Bar for its investigation of Stanley Woodward, Jr., a top justice official who signed the paperwork creating the $1.8 billion fund. Another lawyer for Mr. Trump, Daniel Epstein, will be banned from making court appearances in the Southern District of Florida for 1 year. Judge Williams also opened up the possibility of Mr. Trump having to pay monetary penalties in the case. Several third parties have filed friend of the court briefs in the case, and she said those lawyers could request reimbursement from Mr. Trump for their costs. As a reminder, you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And now a break from politics into science for a moment. A sweet surprise, scientists find sugar deep in our galaxy. It's the first time a sugar molecule has been detected in interstellar space. The discovery provides tantalizing new clues into how life may have arisen on Earth. This is an article by Rebecca Zombach. Our understanding of the Milky Way just got a little bit sweeter. For the first time, scientists have spotted sugar in interstellar space, providing an important clue about the origins of sugar on Earth and possibly the rise of life, according to a new paper published on Monday in the journal Nature Astronomy. This is a real bona fide sugar, said Brett McGuire, an astrochemist at MIT who was not involved in the study. It's just incredibly exciting. Sugar's origins on Earth are mysterious. Science know it must have been present very early on because it's a necessity for life to arise. But lab experiments to recreate the necessary chemical conditions have repeatedly failed to create these molecules. So how did sugar get there? Scientists think it could have been delivered to Earth by asteroid and comet impacts early in the planet's history, because several kinds of sugars, including glucose and ribose, have been found on asteroids and meteorites. But the question of where they came from before that went unanswered. People had a lot of interest in trying to find these molecules, said Izaskin Jimenez Serra, an astrochemist at the Center for Astrobiology in Spain, who led the new study. In the early 2000s, when the search for sugar was spinning up but not yielding results, I didn't actually have much hope, she said. But in recent years, as researchers detected other large organic molecules in nebulae, she became more optimistic. The Milky Way's interstellar medium was a likely spot for sugar. The interstellar medium is all the dust and gases in between solar systems, and despite it having extreme conditions, it's an impressive chemical factory, the authors of the new study wrote. Hundreds of molecules, including some building blocks of the cellular messenger RNA, have been found there, and laboratory experiments suggested that sugars could form from chemical reactions in ices in the interstellar medium. So, if they were going to spot sugar, it would make sense to find it there. Dr. Jimenez Serra and her collaborators used 2 radio telescopes to peer deep into the center of the Milky Way, collecting data on the radio frequencies the interstellar medium emitted. As molecules in space spin and move, they produce different frequencies. By comparing the patterns of frequencies they found in space to the patterns that molecules produced in labs, the researchers could see what molecules were out there. At last, they found the sweet spot. One of the patterns from the nebula near the center of the Milky Way matched up with that of a sugar called erythrulose. Erythrulose is made out of 4 carbon atoms, 8 hydrogen atoms, and 4 oxygen atoms. It's found on Earth in raspberries. It was this very beautiful match, said Dr. Jimenez Serra, adding that when she saw it, my heart started beating very, very fast. It was an exciting moment, but she wanted to be sure it was sugar. The team checked and checked again, but it wasn't some other molecule or simply a mistake. It wasn't some other molecule or simply a mistake, but the results held up. Their data and analysis support their conclusion that the molecule is there, Dr. McGuire said. They went to extraordinary lengths to account for all possible interlopers. The results also won the approval of Yoshihiro Furikawa, an astrochemist at Tohoku University in Japan, who was not involved in the study. His work led to the discovery of sugars on the asteroid Bennu a few years ago. The new finding confirms that sugar can form without life in the interstellar medium and even before stars and planets have formed. That's a critical step to forming RNA and DNA and to explaining how life arose on Earth. It also makes it more likely that life could have formed somewhere else. the interstellar medium is capable of forming these ingredients, it could also be found in other molecule clouds across the galaxy, enhancing the chances for life to develop elsewhere, Dr. Jimenez Serra said. And this sugar is just the beginning. Dr. Jimenez Serra is eager to look for larger sugars such as ribose and deoxyribose, which build RNA and DNA. The researchers estimated that 0.5 to 50 million tons of this sugar could have been delivered to Earth during the critical early part of its life. Equally interesting is what they didn't find, a slightly smaller sugar, one with 3 carbon atoms. Since they found the more complex version, it's surprising that they didn't see the simpler version. It defies expectations in some ways, based on the chemistry we understand, Dr. McGuire said. And I'm looking forward to seeing the community sink its teeth into this and say, wow, this was weird, this was wild, this was unexpected. What does it mean? Now back to politics for a moment. Trump says fighting with Iran has resumed as he orders blockade and tolls. After several days of strikes, the president notified Congress that fighting has begun again and announced shipping fees that his administration previously deemed illegal. This is an article by Peter Baker. President Trump's much touted ceasefire with Iran effectively collapsed on Monday as he ordered the reinstatement of a naval blockade and announced that he will impose tolls on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, despite his own administration's position that such fees violate international law. Mr. Trump's actions came shortly after he formally notified Congress that fighting has resumed amid tit-for-tat attacks by both sides in recent days in a war that lawmakers have directed him to end or seek their authorization to continue. U.S. forces conducted a third consecutive night of strikes against Iran on Monday, military officials announced. As the ceasefire that he once hailed dissolved, Mr. Trump dismissed its importance, saying in a radio interview that such agreements don't mean much, while outlining no new strategy for how to resolve the conflict. The developments left the president without a clear path forward, given that neither bombs and missiles nor diplomatic negotiations have yielded a palatable outcome. Oil prices surged and stocks fell on news of the naval blockade and shipping tolls, increasing pressure again, even as many Republican lawmakers have expressed worries about the economic toll and sought to put the focus back on domestic issues in advance of this fall's midterm elections. The Hormuz Strait is open and will remain open with or without Iran, Mr. Trump wrote on social media. He added, the USA will be, from this point forward, known as the guardian of the Hormuz Strait, but as such and as a matter of fairness, will be reimbursed at the rate of 20% on all cargo shipped for any and all costs necessary to do the job of providing safety and security to this very volatile section of the world. At a session with reporters later in the day, he justified the decision to charge shippers in much the same way he often talks about relationships with allies he thinks should pay the United States for its support. I want to be reimbursed because we're protecting a very rich portion of the world, he said, listing longtime U.S. friends like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates, and they will do very well. The decision to charge shippers flies in the face of the administration's own stance when Iran threatened to do the same. Even in recent weeks, Mr. Trump's team has insisted that charging for safe passage in the strait was intolerable. No country is allowed to charge tolls or fees on an international waterway. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said last month, This is normal that we will never be able to accept, and he said several weeks before that. Mr. Trump made no effort in his social media posts or various interviews on Monday to explain how the new fees differ from the ones that Iran planned to impose, nor did he say how long they would be in effect. The White House did not respond to a request for comment about how the president reconciled his new position with his old position. Again, due to the length of the article, I'll skip to the concluding paragraphs. The president's hope that the ceasefire would resolve the issue foundered in part on the language of the deal itself, which said that Iran would make arrangements using its best efforts for the safe passage of commercial vessels, a phrase that it has interpreted as acknowledging its control. While Mr. Trump has authorized new strikes, there was little sense that they would necessarily change Iran's calculus if the far more intense 38-day bombardment that opened the war did not. And Mr. Trump appears less than eager to return to full scale war as Republicans facing elections this fall agitate for an end to the conflict that is deeply unpopular with voters, according to polls. Even as he said last week that he thought the ceasefire was over, he said that talks would continue. In the interview with Mr. Hewitt, Mr. Trump all but dismissed the importance of his own ceasefire agreement, suggesting that he never expected it to succeed, even though the White House had called it a historic breakthrough. The ceasefire was a memorandum of understanding, and they don't mean much, he said. He added that it was sort of a test, that Iranians failed. These people are crazy, Mr. Trump said. We had a deal where we won everything and they basically break the deal. You know, they make deals. To them, deals are made to be broken. They are extremely unreliable people. Moving to weather. Heat waves in Europe linked to thousands of excess deaths. While the full toll will take months to calculate, death statistics already look substantial compared with historical averages. By Amelia Nierenberg. The heat broiling Europe in recent weeks is thought to have led to thousands of excess deaths, officials say, and is posing an extreme risk of wildfires, which have already burned through parts of Spain, Portugal, and France. In Britain, the National Weather Agency said on Monday that more than 2,700 people in England and Wales were thought to have died from heat related causes in recent heat waves. Climate change was estimated to be responsible for 42% of those deaths, it added. Climate change fueled heat that is claiming lives, disrupting schools and hospitals, and shutting down transport and infrastructure. Claire Burns, an expert in extreme weather and climate change at Imperial College London, said in a statement. Here's what to know about the extreme weather in Europe, which over 3 decades has been the world's fastest growing continent. How dangerous has the heat been? The full death tolls linked to heat may take months to calculate because investigations must be conducted for each death, but death statistics compared with historical averages point to a significant rise. In Britain, in late May, about 550 people were estimated to have died from heat related causes, the country's weather agency, the Met Office, said on Monday. In June, that spiked to about 2,200 in England and Wales. The daytime maximum temperature across England and Wales are now roughly 3 to 4 degrees Celsius hotter than they would have been without human induced climate change, the Met Office said. Both events were record breaking due to the impacts of climate change. In France, French health authorities estimated about 1,000 excess deaths over a few days in late June as temperatures rose to their highest recorded levels. In just one region, on just one day in late June, 220 people came to the emergency room for heat related reasons, French authorities have said in a report on Friday. In Germany, the June heat wave led to about 5,100 heat related deaths, health authorities estimated on Thursday, noting that temperatures of this intensity have not previously occurred in Germany. Weather agencies had predicted temperatures of up to 41 Celsius, which is 106 degrees Fahrenheit, in parts of Germany in June. Dry conditions are contributing to the spread of wildfires. About 2.5 million acres burned in Europe last year, which was the worst on record. That figure was nearly double the annual average from 2006 to 2024. This year, the figures for fires and burned areas in 2026 are already above average, with blazes in France, Portugal, and Spain this month. In France, a wildfire broke out on Sunday in the Fontainebleau forest southeast of Paris. Farmers helped firefighters with water supply, local authorities said on social media on Monday. Hundreds of firefighters are battling the blaze, which burned almost 2,000 acres overnight, the National Fire Service said on social media on Monday. The intense heat and dry soil have created an exceptional risk of forest fires, Meteo France, the National Weather Service, said on Friday. Last week, a separate wildfire scorched at least 11,000 acres and forced more than 10,000 people to evacuate. In Wales, several wildfires and grass fires burned on Monday. In North Wales, fire and rescue services said on social media, and residents were evacuated. On Monday, firefighters were working to quell a fire that had started on Sunday at Conwy Mountain on the coast. In Spain, a wildfire Saturday killed at least 12 people in the southern part of the country, officials said, most of whom were foreigners. More than 20 others were missing, and more than 1,400 had to flee their homes. The fire sped across parched vegetation at times at a rate of 328 feet per minute, said Felix Bolaños, Spain's deputy prime minister. Europe is heating up fast. While the degree to which a single heat event is influenced by climate change requires specific attribution studies, scientists are certain that heat waves around the world are generally becoming hotter, more frequent, and longer lasting, and Europe has been warming faster than any other continent. In 2025, almost the entire continent was hotter than normal. Researchers estimate that in recent years, Europe has seen tens of thousands of heat related deaths annually. If anyone listening is being impacted, here's some tips for how to cool off. Staying cool and hydrating are often the two most important things to do to avoid feeling sick and being in discomfort in extreme heat. Here are some other ways to keep cool. Block out the windows in your home, especially those that get afternoon sun, with a blanket or a darker sheet during the day to keep the heat out. At night, keep windows open and run fans to circulate air. Spritz your skin with a mist of cool or room temperature water, or wipe your forehead with a cool cloth. Cold showers can also help to cool you down. If you need to be outdoors, put ice cubes in your water bottle and drink cool liquids. If you plan to exercise, douse your head in cold water. Swimming is also a great way to exercise and keep cool. As a reminder, you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. ICE agent kills person and vehicle in Maine, Homeland Security says. The fatal shooting in Biddeford, Maine was the second in a week involving an immigration and customs enforcement agent firing into a vehicle. This article is by J.C. Fortin, Heather Beasley Doyle, Miriam Jordan, and Hamad Al-Aziz. A federal immigration agent shot and killed a person in a vehicle on Monday in the coastal city of Biddeford, Maine, according to the Department of Homeland Security. The state's governor, the city's mayor, and other elected officials said they were seeking details and demanded a full investigation of the killing. It was the second fatal shooting in a week involving an ICE agent firing into a vehicle. The Homeland Security Department said in a statement that at about 7 a.m., ICE agents had been monitoring the last known address of someone who was in the country illegally for whom they had a removal order. A person then left that address in a vehicle, according to the statement. The agents then tried to stop the vehicle, the statement said. The vehicle attempted to flee the scene, and fearing for public safety, an officer discharged his weapon, the statement continued. The driver was struck and died from his injuries. In a separate communication received by some members of Congress, the department used more pointed language, saying the driver had weaponized his vehicle toward law enforcement. As of Monday evening, no video evidence confirming the government's version of events had emerged. Since last year, federal agents have fired on more than 20 people, many of whom were shot in their vehicles. In some cases, video evidence has undermined the accounts initially provided by federal officials. The man who was killed was Joan Sebastian Guerrero, according to Matthew Felling, a spokesperson for Senator Angus King of Maine. Mr. Felling said that Mr. King, an independent, had spoken earlier in the day with Mark Wayne Mullen, the Homeland Security Secretary. Mr. Mullen initially told the senator that the person who was shot had been ordered to leave the country and had been the target of an arrest warrant. But according to the spokesman, Mr. Mullen called the senator hours later to correct the information, telling him that the driver had not been the target. He said they were looking for someone, essentially, and the person they shot was not the person they were looking for, Mr. Felling said. It's unclear whether the person who was shot had been in the country illegally. The Embassy of Colombia said in a statement that it was helping the family of a Colombian national who had died in Biddeford. The embassy also said that it had requested information from the Department of Homeland Security regarding the circumstances surrounding this lamentable death. Social media recorded early Monday showed agents surrounding a body in an intersection in a residential neighborhood of Biddeford next to a car with bullet holes in the windshield as local police officers arrived on the scene. Liam LaFountain, Biddeford's mayor, called for a full, thorough, and transparent investigation into this fatal accident in a statement adding, "We will get answers, but we do not have them yet." The shooting came amid an aggressive ramp up of immigration arrests nationally in recent weeks. Daily arrests of immigrants in the United States doubled in the last week of June and had continued to climb. Again, in the interest of brevity, I'll skip to the end. On Monday night, hundreds of protesters marched through the downtown Biddeford as they sang and banged drums. Some shouted, "ICE out of Maine." Ryan Fecteau, Speaker of the Maine House, said in a speech during the rally that his grandparents had arrived in Maine from Quebec decades ago to work in textile mills alongside other immigrants. "This is my message to the federal government. Get out of our state, get out of our city. We welcome the other here," said Mr. Fecteau, a Democrat. Hundreds of immigrants were detained during the January enforcement surge, which ICE called Operation Catch of the Day, a reference to the state's commercial seafood and lobster industry. "Everyone thought the surge was over, but ICE has been present and in large numbers," said Anna Welch, founding director of the Refugee and Human Rights Clinic at the University of Maine School of Law. The shooting on Monday, she said, raises serious concerns about what kinds of protocol and training agents are getting to ensure that violence doesn't escalate to the point of someone being shot in the head. Why the Twin Earthquakes in Venezuela Were So Deadly, by James Glanz, Helmuth Rosales, and Marco Hernandez. Any large earthquake can be dangerous, but the residents of Caracas and Venezuelan coastal cities like La Garia and Catia la Mar were victims of several unlucky factors. Two quakes in rapid succession, a fault that ruptured toward more populated areas, soft ground, and shallow depth of the temblors all combined to make the June 24th disaster especially severe, even for areas that were miles away from the epicenter. Here is what made it so deadly: the doublet. First and most important, there was not one earthquake but two, separated by just 39 seconds. Seismologists call this a doublet. The first was smaller, measuring 7.2 in magnitude. The second was much more powerful, measuring 7.5. The doublet meant that buildings had to withstand chaotic shaking for far longer than they would have in an ordinary earthquake. "Almost certainly what happened was the first earthquake triggered the second one," said David Oglesby, a professor of geophysics at the University of California, Riverside. The earthquake left over 2,200 people dead, according to the Venezuelan government. Over 400 buildings were destroyed and hundreds more were damaged. The direction. Seismic waves from the first quake radiated outward in all directions, but it was the waves traveling east that eventually reached a point in the San Sebastian Fault that was ready to slip. That set off a second earthquake. The rupture from that continued east more than 100 miles toward Caracas, the capital. "There were two directions this fault could have gone," said William Barnhart, a geophysicist in the Earthquake Hazards Program of the United States Geological Survey. "It could have gone to the west or to the east toward Caracas. They would have been lucky if it had gone the other direction." The initial rupture occurred on what is known as the Volcano Fault, part of the system that produced a tremendous earthquake in the 19th century, Dr. Barnard said. Satellite imagery shows that the second quake then traveled east along a well-known seam between two of Earth's tectonic plates, the San Sebastian Fault. "We know that the fault extended as far as Caracas," said Dr. Barnhart, "and that starts to explain in part why there's so much shaking there." The ground shift. Scientists compared satellite imagery from before and after the quake to measure how much the ground shifted. In coastal regions such as La Guara, where the fault runs only a couple of miles offshore directly beneath the city, the ground moved as much as 1.5 feet to the west. The San Sebastian is a strike-slip fault, meaning that the Earth moves primarily horizontally along it. During the quake, regions to the north of the fault slipped east, while regions to the south of the fault slipped west. In areas built directly on top of the fault, the displacement is made clear by satellite analysis. For example, the northern half of the Simon Bolivar International Airport was displaced to the east, and the southern half being pushed in the opposite direction. The San Sebastian Fault runs along the seam between the two directions of displacement. Although cracks in the airport ground were visible in post-quake imagery, satellite analysis indicates that the fault did not reach the surface of the Earth in that region, Dr. Barnard said. Had it done so, the contrast between the two directions of displacement would have been even starker, he The directivity effect. Another factor may have increased the strength of the shaking to the east of the rupture, Dr. Oglesby said. As the rupture moved east, it may have pushed up the amplitude or strength of seismic waves, piling them like waves in front of a boat or sound ahead of a speeding motorcycle. The effect, known as directivity, probably amplified the strength of the shaking toward Caracas, though more data is needed to confirm it. Directivity very likely contributed to the strong ground motion in Caracas and the area overall, Dr. Oglesby said. It could make the difference between a building standing with damage and completely collapsing. Other factors, as shallow as it gets, the depth of the quakes, or precisely the lack of it, may have compounded the destruction. The soft soil, yet another process that seismologists study, is how the shaking or seismic waves make their way to the surface. In the simplest terms, a solid rock surface tends to damp down the waves, and a softer sedimentary surface amplifies them. Other factors. Engineers say Venezuela's seismic codes are some of the best in Latin America. The question is whether they were followed. From the scale of destruction, it appeared that some and perhaps many buildings had not been built to code, though experts said a full accounting would have to wait until the search for survivors had ended. Far more study will be required to understand why and how so many buildings fell apart in Venezuela. Some collapses may have been the result of so-called soft stories, where a single floor, often the ground floor, is not as strong or well designed as others in the same building. In other cases, columns seem to have given way throughout entire buildings, suggesting that they lacked proper reinforcement or the contractor skimped on the amount of steel. Other buildings may have folded and fallen simply because they predated Venezuela's more recent code upgrades. There were also buildings that are a total loss, walls and contents spilling onto the ground but still stand. That allowed residents to escape. Outcomes like that would presumably be consistent with codes that prioritize human survival over structural preservation. Again, I did skip parts of that article. To hear it in its entirety, the number 716-821-5555. Sam Neill, leading man in Jurassic Park, dies at 78. He appeared in more than 150 films and TV shows over a 5-decade career, but was perhaps best known for his star turn in the dinosaur blockbuster. This article is by Natasha Frost and Zachary Wolfe. Sam Neill, the ruggedly handsome and remarkably versatile screen actor from New Zealand, who appeared in more than 150 films and television shows over a 5-decade career and was perhaps best known for his star turn as the dashing paleontologist Dr. Alan Grant in the blockbuster Jurassic Park series, died on Monday in Sydney, Australia. He was 78. His family announced the death in an Instagram post but did not specify the cause or where in Sydney he died. Mr. Neill was diagnosed with angioimmunoblastic T-cell lymphoma in March in 2022, but the statement said that he was cancer-free when he died. Born in Northern Ireland and raised in New Zealand, Mr. Neill had the magnetism of a leading man and a character actor's taste for variety. 2 roles in films released in 1993 give a sense of his range. For the director Steven Spielberg, he played the wonderstruck Dr. Grant in the first Jurassic Park movie, filled with crowd-pleasing computer-generated effects. At the same time, he portrayed the forlorn, cuckolded husband in Jane Campion's severe and mysterious drama, The Piano. He was also a brooding or troubled spouse to Angelica Houston, Family Pictures, Nicole Kidman, Dead Calm, and Meryl Streep, A Cry in the Dark. His coolly seductive portrayal of early 20th century spy Sidney Riley in the 1983 British TV show Riley, Ace of Spies, makes it clear why he ended up a few years later in the running to become the next James Bond. Writing in the New York Times, critics praised him for nuanced performances, even in forgettable projects, describing his cryptic brusqueness in the TV show Alcatraz and his avuncular suavity tinged with a dignified sadness in the 2000 film The Dish. His mentor was the renowned English actor James Mason, and Mr. Neill's description of Mr. Mason's gift could also speak for his own. He brought a sense of complexity to parts, Mr. Neal told Entertainment Weekly in 1993. He was prepared to show the darker sides of light characters and vice versa. Nigel John Dermot Neal was born on September 14th, 1947, to Dermot Neal, a New Zealander who served as a British Army officer, and his English wife, Priscilla Ingham Neal, on their kitchen table in Omagh, in a town in County Tyrone, Northern Ireland. He was the second of 3 children. Mr. Neal faced obstacles as a child that included a stutter, what he perceived to be an embarrassingly grand British accent, and the name Nigel. To land in a pretty rough playground in a New Zealand primary school with a plum in the voice and Nigel for a name was asking for trouble, he wrote. At 11, he took the name Sam, inspired by characters in Westerns. It was, he wrote, probably the best decision I made in my life. Sam is easy to say, sounds friendly, sounds a bit blokey, and has a touch of the Labrador about it. An international celebrity, Mr. Neal was one of his country's most famous citizens, but he wrote in his memoir that he had never quite shaken the insecure child who had made the long journey from Northern Ireland. My exterior is undoubtedly Sam the New Zealander, he wrote. You might even recognize him, but inside, somewhere very deep, there lives a small, shy boy who sounds very different, and his name is not Sam, it is Nigel. Again, I did abbreviate parts of that article. As a reminder, you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Court revives lawsuits tying Tylenol use in pregnancy to autism and to ADHD. A federal appeals court overruled a district judge who dismissed the lawsuits, citing unreliable scientific evidence. This article is by Izine Goroshki. A U.S. appeals court on Monday reversed a trial judge decision to dismiss lawsuits against the makers of Tylenol, reviving hundreds of cases filed by families who claim that their children developed autism or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder after their mothers took Tylenol during pregnancy. The judges, all Democratic appointees, ruled that the lower court overstepped by excluding scientific evidence presented by expert witnesses on behalf of the plaintiffs. That expert testimony, the judges argued, was valid evidence about a scientific question that they say is still under dispute. The decision came less than a year after President Trump and top health advisors warned that taking acetaminophen, the active painkiller in Tylenol, while pregnant could cause autism and ADHD in children. The link is unproven. While some studies have suggested that there may be a small increase in risk, large trials aiming to account for underlying genetics and other factors have found no evidence that the painkiller can cause neurodevelopment disorders in children. Major medical groups, including the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, have consistently stressed that Tylenol is the safest option to treat pain or fever during pregnancy. Untreated fevers can pose risk to both the mother and the fetus, including neurodevelopmental issues. The ruling acknowledged the national attention to the issue. The appeals arise against the backdrop of significant debate in the relevant scientific communities, the judge wrote. That debate has also become political, but the issue before us is not political. At the center of the appeals court decision was the question of whether the scientific evidence presented by the plaintiffs held merit. The primary expert witness for the plaintiffs was Andrea Beccarelli, the dean of Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, who submitted a report claiming that substantial evidence supported a causal link between the use of acetaminophen during pregnancy and neurodevelopmental disorders like autism and ADHD in children, especially when taken frequently at high doses. In December 2024, U.S. District Judge Denise Cote sided with lawyers for the defendants and ruled that Dr. Beccarelli had cherry-picked and misrepresented study results in his testimony and was therefore unreliable. During the November 2025 hearing, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, Judge Gerald Lynch argued that the scientific information presented was valid even if it was under dispute. Reasonable scientists do appear to disagree, he said. Ashley Keller, a lawyer for the Maine law firm representing the representing the plaintiffs, Keller Postman, said that Monday's ruling represented vindication for the scientific evidence our clients have presented from the outset. He added, "We look forward to presenting that evidence to the jury." The defendants in the suits are Kenvue, which has been the maker of Tylenol since it was spun off from Johnson & Johnson in 2023, and major retailers that sell generic versions of acetaminophen. We are not deciding whether there is a general causal relationship between acetaminophen and ADHD and/or ASD, the judges wrote. We are also not deciding whether the manufacturers of acetaminophen must warn customers about any alleged risk posed by such a potential causal relationship. And we are certainly not deciding the approach that policymakers concerned with protecting public health should take to regarding regulating the use of acetaminophen. Rather, they continued, we are called upon to decide how closely a trial court may scrutinize a qualified expert's conclusion when that expert follows methodologies that are generally accepted in their field. Again, I took liberties in abbreviating that article, and to hear it in its entirety, 716-821-5555. And now, attempting to end on a positive note, some sports news. The city that never sleeps suits up to play late night soccer. A pilot program invites people to play soccer under the lights overnight for the duration of the World Cup. The fields have seen no shortage of action. This article is by Mark Lederman. Mark Lederman. There are few, if any, spectators. The games are played in worn t-shirts and the lights aren't as bright as at the World Cups, but they're on. To celebrate its status as World Cup host city, New York is keeping the lights on overnight at one soccer field in each of the 5 boroughs for the length of the tournament. But who on earth would want to play soccer around midnight on a weekday? Russell Hasnett of Midwood, Brooklyn, knows one group of people, his 60-member football family. We're just working guys trying to play, Mr. Hasnett said. The players, who coordinate their games in a group chat, met in New York City but come from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Mexico, Egypt, and elsewhere. They're a mix of contractors, doctors, one taekwondo instructor, cousins, friends, and fathers. They've long scoured the city for a place to play pickup soccer late on Tuesday nights, a rare time that is free for everyone. Some of their games have ended with police summons for being in the park after hours. It's tough getting spaces, said Mr. Hasnott, 37. So he was thrilled to find himself surrounded by his extended soccer family under the lights in a full moon in Calvert Vaux Park in Gravesend, Brooklyn. After some stretching and catching up, the men kicked off a little after 10 p.m. on a recent Tuesday. Other players attracted by the lights included pickup soccer nomads and young people with a serious case of World Cup fever. Hundreds of people have shown up to play across the city each night, said Maya Honda, a former campaign manager for Mayor Zohran Mamdani, a soccer fanatic. The world named Ms. Honda to a new and temporary position of World Cup czar. Honda called the program privately funded to the tune of $800,000, in many ways a pilot, as the city looks to expand access to sports, particularly affordable ones like soccer, which requires not much more than an open space, a ball, and enough light to see it. There is high demand, and we're excited to meet that, Ms. Honda said. New Yorkers came out to play the beautiful game beneath the dark skies for different reasons. Daniel Bishop, 19, of Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, said he had not played soccer for years until the World Cup inspired him to stop by Calvert Vaux Park. He was kicking a ball around with an older man he met that night. They discovered they both spoke Russian. He told me to find a good woman, Mr. Bishop said. The action continued nearby for Mr. Hasnott Group, whose game ran longer than the typical 90 minutes. Winning would be nice, but for Ghazi Mohmood, 25, a construction manager from Kensington, Brooklyn, what he wanted most was to clear his head. I got yelled at today for 30 minutes straight, Mr. Mahmoud said, recalling his day at work. But when you're playing, everything is quiet for a bit. Tasbih Sharar, 25, also Kensington, is the goalie in the football family. The action in Gravesend came to him in bursts. When it was slow, Mr. Sharari Shahryar said he enjoyed the breeze. It's really beautiful out here, Mr. Shahryar said. As midnight approached, the players took a break and some gathered on the field to kneel in prayer. We've never not played in the last 10 years, Mr. Hasnett said. That's the love of the game. The World Cup helps. Across the city in Queens on a recent Thursday night, a youth team started by a local Islamic organization filtered away from the field at Astoria Park at around 10 p.m. as the adults took over. The field had attracted people from around the city, including Alejandro Sebastian Riera, 20, who took the L train to the G to the 7 to the R from Ridgewood, Queens. Mr. Riera, a college student, said he grew up playing on dirt fields in Ecuador. He's found the pickup scene in New York City to be livelier and kinder. He can find a game pretty much anywhere. I'm using soccer to explore the boroughs, said Mr. Rivera said. Sino Yazubi, 19 of Flushing, and Andrit Yamarej, 27 of Astoria, were no strangers to Astoria Park, where night games they've played in the past have had to stop early when the city shuts the lights off around 10 or 11 p.m. They said it's difficult to find space earlier in the day when the field is often booked or reserved for youth programs. It's the summer and everyone wants to play, Mr. Yazbashi said. Now we're getting good games. Brittany Pope showed up in lacrosse shoes, having been convinced to try soccer by Emma Balaz. Both are 31 and live in Astoria. Ms. Pope, originally from Idaho, said she met most of her friends in the city through LGBTQ sports leagues. As the crowd thinned around 11 p.m., Mr. Yazbashi and Mr. Jamari started counting heads with Josef Dermek, 20, trying to see if they had enough to start a game. Ms. Pope and Ms. Ballas were in. The game started and Mr. Dermek began yelling at a longtime teammate, his younger brother, Mohammed Dermek. I don't care, the younger Dermek brother said. We argue a lot and then we love each other. The game next to them included Adam Rozaki, 20 of Astoria, who said he had scored around 10 goals. Most of the other players in the match were members of his family, he said. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity, Mr. Rozaki said. It brought us together. To conclude, you have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 14th issue of the front section of the New York Times. We read from the front section of the New York Times every Sunday at 1 p.m. Your reader has been Patrice. It's been my pleasure to read to you, and I hope you have a fantastic day.